All right, welcome back to the Rollout. I'm Jeff Pratt, and joining me as always is Trent Henrich. We are split screen again for the second straight episode. Feels good. Trent, how are you doing on this Wednesday afternoon?
I'm doing well. I'm a little worried about the Patriots right now and some other teams in the NFL, but I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, these next few weeks, or honestly, next few days, are definitely going to be telling about what happens with the Patriots and, the two other matchups that might not be played this week. But we are back with our week 5 picks. Trent, we both did pretty well last week, nailing 12 for 15 games with the Steelers Titans game being postponed. That sits us at around me with 43 out of 63 possible picks and you with 42 out of 63 possible picks. So we are well above 500. So we're going to have to bomb on these picks today if we want to get back to where we were. But I'll just pick things up right away with the Thursday night game. Bucks for Bears. Go for it, Trent.
Yeah, there's going to be some key players out in this matchup here. I know Chris Godwin's already been ruled out. I believe McCoy has as well. And there's a chance Fournette doesn't play as on top of those two. So the Bucks are going to be a little bit depleted on offense. Having said that, they still have plenty of weapons. I still don't like the Bears. I'm going with the Bucks.
Yeah, that pretty much wraps up exactly how I was going to put it. Although I think I like the Bears a little bit more than you. I'm pretty sure, Trent, you said you would never take the Bears in any pick ever. In this series. You took them. Did you not take them this week? You took them this week.
And they lost the one week
And
I
they lost.
decided to take them.
So you're back to not taking them again.
I thought I had some faith in Nick Foles after they came back against the Falcons, but what I realized is the Falcons just aren't it. They stink.
Yeah, I agree. But what's interesting is I wouldn't necessarily put this on Nick Folk because it looks like Matt Nagy just didn't want him to throw the ball. Like they were down 2 scores in the early fourth, and they were still just running the ball first, second, sometimes even third down. It was like they were playing for the loss. It was very interesting. They were playing super conservatively. I think that Nick Foles, he's definitely going to have a better chance to attack this defense. Indy has probably a top 3 defense in the league right now. Tampa Bay can't boast that, especially with all their injuries. All that being said, we can move on from this. I'm taking the Bucks as well. By the way, Fournette, I think, is expected to be out for this game now, too. And Godwin's a little banged up, but he's got him a little banged up. Or not Godwin, Evans. Mike Evans is a little banged up, but I think he and Scotty Miller are both expected to play, which would definitely be big for Tom Brady. Another big, hopefully, for Ronald Jones, who looked good for the first time as a starter last week. But yeah, we'll both get the Bucks there, and let's move on to these next games. Which first of our pending games, it's Buffalo Bills taking on the Tennessee Titans, who just can't seem to get it together when it comes to COVID. Obviously, they held a protocol-breaking practice at a local high school while they were shut down, and that did not work out well for them because they had 2 new positive tests today, putting their game with Buffalo in jeopardy. But Trent, we're going to be optimists here and act like this game is going to be played. So that being said, who are you taking?
I'm still on the Josh Allen train. I'm not getting off anytime soon. They're still rolling. They still look good. That's all I really got to say about that. The one thing I'm looking forward to, if this game does happen, maybe A.J. Brown's first game back. Hopefully, like to see him play well this week if they play.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm taking the Bills. That's because this Texans team hasn't played a game now in a week. They haven't been able to practice in or not. Did I say Texans or Titans? I said Texans. Yeah,
You said Texans, but it's
I said
Titans,
Texans.
right?
Well, the Texans aren't doing much better despite them actually practicing. I know that they're one of your favorite picks this year, Trent. But the Titans haven't practiced in like a week and a half, 2 weeks now. They haven't played since week 2, or week 3. Sorry. So this is definitely going to be a tough game for them to pick things back up right against a rolling Buffalo Bills team led by Josh Allen, who I'm the conductor of the Josh Allen train, as many of you know. Trent just hopped on in the caboose, but he was able to get there in time. All that being said, I'll stop rambling. I'm going to go with the Bills as well. I think that you'd probably be pressed not to pick them in this game. That's definitely an interesting choice if you don't. But moving on, Now we'll get to your favorite pick this year, Trent, the Houston Texans, who just fired their head coach and GM, Bill O'Brien. Probably a move that was long overdue, but still kind of questionable to do it in the middle of the season. A couple hours after, I'm pretty sure he gave himself more lenience with the play calling. So that might have rubbed the other players and coordinators the wrong way. I know that J.J. Watt and the defensive coordinator got into a fight with him a couple hours before he was fired. We don't really know what's going on. I'm sure that information will get leaked eventually, and we'll talk about it then. But yeah, we've got this Houston Texans team led by interim head coach Romeo Crennel of Patriots. Is to the job of handling this team. He's got some talent to work with, taking on a Jacksonville Jaguars team where Trent, DJ Chark, finally broke out last week. I know you said he was going to be a top 15 fantasy receiver this year. Didn't play up to par the first couple of weeks, was obviously struggling with some injuries, but I think came back, had 8 catches for 90-plus yards, I think, and 2 touchdowns. So he looked really good. Hopefully he can keep it rolling. And I think this is going to be an interesting matchup. So who are you going to take?
This is tough for me because I'm really high on the stash as a quarterback. I'm higher on Watson, but he also hasn't figured things out this season. So it's a really weird spot to be in. The only reason why I'm going to go with the Texans is because I was surprised the Jags lost to the Bengals last week. I thought that even though it was actually a pretty entertaining game, I expected them to win that game. So I'm gonna go with the Texans because I just don't see how they go 0-5. It just, I mean, I'm Bill. Bill O'Brien had to go. Like that was They made the right move. I just, how are they gonna react to what just happened? I'm hoping Watson just takes over the offense, runs it as it should be run, and the Texans get their first win.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I think the Texans get this win pretty much for the same reason. I can't see a team of this caliber of talent starting 0-5, and they have a decent matchup this week. The Jaguars definitely, while they are a good team themselves, they are not necessarily to be frightened of. But I think that, for the people inside the Texans organization, they had to be cringing a little bit watching DeAndre Hopkins get dealt away by their commander-in-chief, Bill O'Brien, and to go start putting up career numbers in Arizona upon receiving an extension. So I think that definitely left a sour taste in their mouth and was probably the first step towards kicking O'Brien out the door. But moving on, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, who, as Trent said, are coming off a win over the Jacksonville Jaguars, which was definitely a big win for them. They needed that, especially Joe Burrow. He's a winner. We all know that. He doesn't like to lose. Wasn't used to doing it at LSU last year. And finally, to get that first win with Cincinnati was big for him, taking on a very tough Baltimore Ravens team. Trent, who are you taking?
I think the Ravens are going to win this game, but it may be more entertaining than people think. Joe Burrow's actually looking really good so far this season. I'm quite surprised how quickly he's come into the NFL and really picked up to where people expected him to play. Having said that, the Ravens defense is one of the toughest in the league. He hasn't faced a defense like this yet, and Lamar Jackson is still running through opposing defenses. So I'm going to go with the Ravens here. I think it's going to be, it could even be just a touchdown and maybe a good game to watch.
Yeah, Trent, I said I was going to take a big upset this week, and this is my upset. I'm going to go with the Bengals. Lamar Jackson, while he's been rushing well, man, he looked bad throwing the football this year. He has certainly seemed to be suffering from a case of the MVP hangover this year. He hasn't looked nearly as good as he did last season. Meanwhile, Joe Burrow, I think probably from a pure quarterback standpoint, might be outplaying him. Obviously, he's playing behind a much worse offensive line and with a much worse team in general. So I don't think we can take their relative team success into account when we talk about that. But when you look at these teams, Trent, Baltimore's defense has been good, but the last 2 weeks they've been kind of shaky. They let Antonio Gibson from Washington have a really big game against them last week. And meanwhile, looking at who the Bengals have, Joe Mixon absolutely exploded for 181 yards and 3 total touchdowns last week. So if he can keep it rolling, I think that there's a chance he could attack this Baltimore defense in a way that they're not necessarily ready for. And finally, look at the Bengals receiving core. AJ Green's been horrid, but T. Higgins has really stepped up into that role. A lot of people are saying that he might actually overtake Tyler Boyd as the number 1 receiver by the end of the year. I'm not ready to go that far, and I've had that argument a couple times over Twitter and on various podcasts. But T. Higgins has certainly looked up to par as a strong number 2 receiver, and Tyler Boyd's looked good himself. So all that being said, I'm going to take the Bengals this week. Could very well blow up in my face, but you got to get risky every now and then. And I don't love the way that the Ravens have been playing the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I really don't hate the Bengals pick. I mean, I could see the upset here. They've had some pretty good history in the past between these two teams. I mean, I'm surprised how Tyler Boyd season in, season out is kind of looked over. He's really played well this season. I think he's getting like 7 catches a game. He's getting over 100 yards a game. Like, he's making the most of his targets. He's definitely Joe Burrow's most trusted wide receiver at this point in time. And AJ Green, I think he's out of his prime, and they paid him a lot of money, and they're going to get disappointed with their investment here. But the Bengals, they're a legit team. They did, have that tie with the Eagles. They beat the Jags team, which I thought, a pretty good team this year. I think it could be close. I don't know if, like I said, you went with the Bengals, I went with the Ravens, but they're also 13.5-point favorites, the Ravens. So if you're into betting, taking 13.5 points with the Bengals would be nice if you really think the Bengals have a chance to win outright.
Yeah, absolutely agree. All right, moving on from those picks, which was the first matchup that we actually disagreed in, Trent. So finally, good to break the ice there. We have the Carolina Panthers taking on the Atlanta Falcons, who, oh man, I think I've just lost all hope in Atlanta. I'm not sure how Dan Quinn still has a job at this point. We've talked about how the first couple of weeks, at least they came out strong and blew a couple of leads. They just looked really bad against Green Bay, who, you give props to Green Bay, missing Devontae Adams. Aaron Rodgers comes out and finds Robert Tonyan for 3 touchdowns. So now, Trent, you were expecting a big game out of Jace Sternberger. And I said, I don't know about that. I think Tanyan's going to go off. And not to say I told you so, but I think we all know how that ended up. But I won't, continue about that. We can move past it, and let's get into the predictions for this game. And Trent, one thing I will say, though, is I think that you and I both need to start giving the Carolina Panthers more credit. We were talking about this team as, I know you said, maybe worse than the Dolphins last week. Now Teddy Bridgewater, Teddy Two Gloves, finally started to get things going last week, beat a very good, very talented Arizona Cardinals team. So they're hot right now, and the Falcons are about as cold as you can be. Who you taking, Trent?
So there's a couple points I want to make. First off,
okay.
No. You're the tiny thing. You were right about that. I admit when I'm wrong, but
you admit when you're wrong. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
The Dolphins are still a good team, and
I agree.
I still can't say if they matched up that I wouldn't take the Dolphins. Having said that, I will never bet on the Falcons again. They have destroyed me for 4 straight weeks now.
Oh, man.
They're like, for our picks, I won't take the Bears. The Falcons are a team I will never bet on now because they've broken my heart. So yeah, I'm gonna ride the Panthers. Mike Davis, I don't think we've ever talked about him. He has filled in so well for Christian McCaffrey.
Oh yeah.
That O-line is really strong. They get some big gaps for him. He's been killing it. And you're right, Teddy Two Gloves looks like a good quarterback, and there's no way I'm picking the Falcons anymore because they keep losing. So give me the Panthers.
Yeah, fair enough. I can't really blame you there. I'm going to take the Panthers as well. I really like this Carolina Panthers team. And this Falcons team, man, they're just a disaster right now. Julio Jones is banged up. I don't think he practiced today either. And even if he's going to suit up, we look at what happened last week. He had out after a quarter and a half. His hamstring injury is just really not healed. I wouldn't be shocked to see him go on the IR at this point to get that hamstring ready, like we saw the Jets do with Le'Veon Bell, who he's about to come off the IR this week, I think. But yeah, all that being said, I'm picking the Panthers. I think DJ Moore is going to have a really big game this week. Obviously, he had a great showing in week 2, but besides that, he's been disappointing fantasy owners, disappointing the two of us. I know that we're both pretty high on him. He's still a very talented kid. Teddy Bridgewater clearly has showed an aptitude for the deep ball that we didn't expect, connecting with Robbie Anderson a lot more than anyone was expecting so far this year. But I think he and DJ Moore get it going this week, and Carolina comes away with a win.
I agree. And I agree with the DJ Moore thing as well. I think he's actually going to break out this week. This is his week.
I agree. You would hope so against this Falcons secondary, but yeah, I definitely do. All right, moving on. We have the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the reigning Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who I think would have lost that game if Cam Newton was the starting quarterback for the Patriots. Brian Hoyer is just atrocious. Jarrett didn't look much better when he came in, but obviously he was cold coming off the bench and wasn't helped out by his receivers necessarily. All that being said, that game's in the past as well. Trent, who are you taking for this matchup?
Yeah, if this game happens, which
Yeah,
it's uncertain right now, rolling with the Chiefs. The Raiders look good to start the season, but the last couple of games they haven't looked like the same team from before. The same team that beat the Saints. I don't think they're that same team right now. Josh Jacobs is kind of his production slowed down a little bit. He's still getting a ton of carries, but he's facing tougher rushing defenses, which is slowing down his production. And this Chiefs defense is no slouch. Even though Damian Harris kind of actually tore him up, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm going to go with the Chiefs here.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if we look at this game from a fantasy perspective, I'd be optimistic about Josh Jacobs' chances looking at how Damian Harris, as Trent said, did last week. And I think that's a great sign for Patriots fans as well. As Damian Harris, I know a lot of people aren't high on Sony Michel. He's obviously on the IR. Harris looked really good. He fits Bill Belichick's style of a workhorse back much more than Sony did. He's much bigger, much more of a bruiser, runs a lot harder than Michel does. I might honestly be more explosive at this point than Michel. So that's definitely something to look forward to as a New England fan. But touching upon this Raiders-Chiefs matchup, I'm going to take the Chiefs as well. It's really hard to pick against them at this point. You know, they've proven that they don't necessarily have to win pretty, but they can get the job done. And this Raiders team is banged up. As Trent mentioned, Josh Jacobs is still a little hurt. Their receiving core is really banged up. I think Hunter Renfrow is probably going to be their number one guy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because he's looked good. But he's not necessarily a number one guy against a team like the Chiefs in a matchup you're going to win. So all that being said, I'm going to roll with Kansas City here as well. All right, let's move on to this next game. It's not my Arizona Cardinals, but, you know, I was really high on the Cardinals this year. Disappointed me the last couple of weeks for sure, and Trent as well, which I'm sure Trent will get into when I throw it to him. But we have the Arizona Cardinals taking on the New York Jets, who will probably be getting Le'Veon Bell back this week, but have lost Sam Darnold and will be putting Joe Flacco in the mix. So I have a feeling I know where we're both going with this. I'll throw the floor to you, though, Trent.
Yeah, the Cardinals really let me down last week. MVP Kyler Murray over there really it hurt. I had an 11 team parlay that all 10 teams hit except the Cardinals. That really hurt. We saw that board really clearly last week though. Just missed that one, which is all right. Having said that, if the Cardinals lose to Joe Flacco and the Jets, there's some serious issues going on in Arizona. Kyler Murray he's got to pick things back up in the air. He's looked good on the ground, but man, oh man, he's thrown quite a few picks the last couple of weeks. He's not really seeing his targets as clearly anymore. I'm going to go with the Cardinals in this one. If Joe Flacco leads the Jets to a win, he may even continue as the starter. I mean, it's possible. I don't know.
Here's an interesting one for you because I don't think Sam Darnold's injury is that serious. But if Joe Flacco, let's say he comes up, does all right, and they lose this game, is there a chance that the Jets throw Sam Darnold on the IR, accept the tank for the rest of the season, and go for Trevor Lawrence and look to move Sam Darnold in the offseason? I know that a lot of Jets fans, you and I agree that Sam Darnold should still be the plan, I think, for the Jets. I mean, he's a really talented quarterback. Obviously, he's playing behind an atrocious O-line with a horrible head coach in Adam Gase that's probably going to get fired midway through the season, if not that at the end of this year. But if you're the Jets, do you even consider that plan of throwing him on the IR and then tanking for Trevor Lawrence?
I'm not a huge fan of it because I think Darnold's a good quarterback. If you watch the games, he's a throwing quarterback. He's very accurate. He gets a lot behind the ball. I like the way he plays. Like you said, he just has an atrocious O-line. He's under pressure and out of the pocket a lot, and he makes the best of the situation he's in. If there was a team that I could see doing that, it would be the Redskins at this point. They're benching Haskins for Kyle Allen, and they actually moved Haskins all the way to the third quarterback in their depth chart, and they moved Alex Smith up to number 2. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did. I think that there's definitely got to be something going on behind the scenes there. There is no reason that Haskins was moved all the way down to third on their depth chart, and he didn't take any reps in practice for Washington today, too. So there's absolutely something going on behind the scenes there. He probably had a pretty serious disagreement with a member of the coaching staff, whether it's Ron Rivera, whoever it is. But I think that, it's very likely we've seen the last of Dwayne Haskins in Washington as well. So I would agree with you there, Trent. I think that they probably would be gunning for Trevor Lawrence too at this point. All right. And by the way, before we move on, if it wasn't clear, I'm going to take the Cardinals in this game too. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to lead the Jets to a win in any matchup at this point in his career. But we'll move on to a game that is probably going to be a lot tougher than people are expecting. We have the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers, two tough-nosed, really gritty, grinded-out teams. Pittsburgh obviously has come out much hotter than a lot of people were expecting this year. Big Ben looked good. They obviously got the week off, so guys like Deontay Johnson, Juju, who are consistently on the injury report, were able to heal up. I know Deontay got out of concussion protocol, which is really big for him. Moving on, Trent, who are you taking in this game?
This is a tough one for me because I think this is a game where the Eagles is probably the turning point of their season here. I know it's only week 5, but they've had a really poor start. They finally got a win last week, and they're playing. I would say a rival of theirs that this is a winnable game for the Eagles. It's more on how well is Carson Wentz going to play. He hasn't looked great so far this year. Goddard's out for that team as well. I think he's on the IR for right now. I'm going to go with the Steelers just because their defense is so strong. I still don't like the Steelers' offense, but their defense to me is top 3 in the league right now, and it's really hard for me seeing a subpar offense of the Eagles to be a top 3 defense of the Steelers. Maybe a close game, but I'm going to say the Steelers edge it out.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you there. I think that is going to be close, but I'm going to go with the Steelers just because the Eagles are so banged up. The Steelers, the Eagles' only chance to win this game, in my opinion, is Carson Wentz either A, needs to step up, which I don't really see happening. He's looked pretty bad, but Miles Sanders needs to get going. And this is not the defense where he's going to get going against, unfortunately for him. I'm rooting for him. I think he's a very talented back. I know Trent really loves him. But he just hasn't been able to pick things up behind a banged up offensive line. And Philadelphia's just been dealing with a myriad of injuries so far this year. So, maybe this could be the turning point of the season for them, but I'm with you, Trent. I'm going to take the Steelers in this game. All right, moving on. We have the no longer Dwayne Haskins led Washington football team taking on the LA Rams, who looked really bad against the Giants last week. And it was the Giants, but Darrell Henderson, who looked tremendous in the 2 weeks prior to that, everyone was coming in expecting him to have a huge week, and he just pooped the bed. To say in a PG phrase there, he was outplayed by Malcolm Brown. Cam Akers is probably coming back this game, which probably is definitely going to limit Henderson's production from a fantasy standpoint. But from a real life standpoint, who are you taking, Trent?
Well, first up, I don't think this Rams running back situation will ever be figured out. It's just clustered and it's not pretty, and there's no true lead back out of that backfield. Luckily for them, they're playing the Washington football team led by Kyle Allen, which I don't like as a quarterback. I do like Terry McLaurin. The Redskins defense is okay. I thought the Rams were going to do a lot better than they did against the Giants. I was quite surprised by how close they kept that game. Still think the Rams get this win, though. And hopefully their offense starts to click again. Jared Goff needs to throw the ball a lot this week. Find, Kupp, Woods, Higbee, everyone. He's got to get them all involved. I'm going to go with the Rams here, and I'm going to say that it's not going to be close.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add there. I do think that if we can say one positive thing about the Washington football team is that their defensive line's been really good this year. So that just kind of adds to our point about not trusting any of the Rams running backs heading in, unless there's a serious injury from a fantasy standpoint. As we saw, Cam Akers was out for a couple of weeks, and that helped provide a somewhat clearer picture to this backfield. But if all three guys are there, you can't trust any of them. Similarly to Baltimore's backfield as well. But yeah, I'm going to take the Rams in this game, and I'm with you, Trent. I don't think it's going to be close. All right, moving on. We have your Miami Dolphins taking on the San Francisco 49ers, banged up 49ers team, but I believe they will be getting Raheem Mostert and Jimmy Garoppolo back for this matchup. Who you taking?
If this was last week, I would have gone with the Dolphins. But knowing Mostert's going to be back and possibly Jimmy G, it's really hard to go against that team because they've looked good without them. I know they lost to the Eagles last week, but the Niners defense is really good. This Dolphins defense is no slouch, though. They were giving Russell Wilson some trouble last week, and Fitzmagic didn't look too bad. And the game was closer against Seahawks than I thought. You texted me and you were telling me how close the game went. I was shocked. The Seahawks pulled away at the end. But I'm going to go with the Niners here. I think it could honestly be only decided by a field goal, though.
Yeah, Trent, I was kind of hoping you would go with Miami so we can match on this, but I'm going to go with the Dolphins here. Take a page out of your playbook. I know you're happy with that pick. I think that Jimmy Garoppolo comes out rusty this week. In my opinion, Nick Mullins hasn't been that bad, whoever they've been throwing out at quarterback over these last couple of weeks has been getting the job done. Because as we know with San Francisco, despite the fact that they're banged up, their quarterback does not decide games. It's their running game and their defense. And they've been able to hold up despite the injuries to guys like Solomon Thomas and Nick Bosa this year. But looking at this matchup, I do think that Miami, I really like how they played against Seattle, and that's without their wideouts, Devontae Parker and Preston Williams, having great games. Neither did Mike Gesicki. So I think that they're going to bounce back in terms of that aspect. Fitzmagic's going to have another good game. I really like Myles Gaskin, what he's been able to do the last couple of games. He's been really solid for them from a fantasy and real life perspective. He looks like he might just be their number one back for the future. So I'm going to roll with the Dolphins. I don't really know why. I know this 49ers team is better, but I'm feeling the Dolphins this week, so we'll go with them.
I love it. That's a great pick. You know what? I hope the Dolphins win. I want the loss there.
All right. Fair enough. All right, moving on. We have the New York Football Giants taking on the Dallas Cowboys, who, Trent, you are not high on at all. We've had this argument multiple times over the past week. I know that you're not a fan of Dak, but you have to look at what he's done over these last couple of weeks and just be amazed at the production and the numbers he's been putting up. He's on pace to break Peyton Manning's single season passing yards record by over 1,300 yards, or I think just around 1,300 yards, which I know we're only through 4 games, so that's probably not going to happen. But at this point, it's still astounding to see him put up those numbers through 4 games. So I don't think it's Dak's fault. The defense has clearly been failing them. Luckily for the Cowboys, I'll start things off here. They're facing the Giants this week, who I don't think will be able to take advantage of their poor defensive showings. And we know that, Trent, I was watching the Cowboys play last week, and I was thinking that they are the equivalent of the Houston Rockets from the last couple of years. We've talked about the NBA. Obviously, the Rockets actually had surprisingly good defense this year, but before that, there were no defense, all offense, just trying to beat teams in a shootout. And that's what I've seen out of the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, that type of gameplay is not evident or not successful when you're trying to win a championship, and they're going to have to change that. They're going to have to tighten things up, especially in football. But this week, I just think they're going to flat out outscore this team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the Cowboys, but there's really no team worse than the Giants at this point in time. Having said that, if the Cowboys do lose to the Giants, Andy Dalton, you may see him next week on the field for these Cowboys.
If the Cowboys lose to the Giants, I might agree with you because that means that Dak Prescott's going to have the worst game of his career.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, Dak, I'll give you this. Dak's numbers have been really good this year. He also has a ton of targets. The guy that's really surprised me this year is Dalton Schultz. He's been killer at tight end. I mean, he's really got guys to throw to every which way, and defenses have to worry about Zeke running the ball, so they don't have an option but to respect the run, and it opens up the pass a lot. But yeah, if the Cowboys lose the Giants this week, the Giants would. The Cowboys would have to start Andy Dalton next week.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll come back to that question after we see what happens with that game. And just to shout out another Cowboys target, CeeDee Lamb. We called that he was going to surpass Michael Gallup early on this season as the Cowboys' number 2 target. And, no discredit to Amari Cooper because he's looked really good, but CeeDee Lamb looks like he's ready to be a number 1 target on a team in his rookie year. He's been really impressive.
Yeah, he has. My only question mark is how he would fare in his rookie season against number 1 cornerbacks on each team. He's been playing against second and third cornerback options, so I think that would be really interesting because for a young wide receiver like that, it's not easy to start playing physical with the big dogs. So only time would tell with that one.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on to our next matchup, Trent. Talk about young wide receivers thrust into that number 1 role. We have the Denver Broncos with Jerry Jeudy. And as you said, Trent, he's not been struggling because he's still been putting up decent numbers, but obviously he's been hindered a little bit from what we would have seen if he was going up against number 2 corners. With Courtland Sutton obviously out, he's been thrust into that role. I think he's responded pretty well. He had a good game last week. Hopefully he can continue building momentum as Drew Lock still recovers, and I believe they're still starting Brett Rippon this game. Yeah, I don't think any of us had heard of Brett Rippon before that game, but he managed to lead that team to a win, even though he threw back-to-back picks late in the game. But all that being said, Jerry Jeudy, he's probably not going to have Stephon Gilmore to worry about, considering Gilmore has COVID. There's a good chance this game's not even played, but we're going to act like it is. Who are you taking, Trent?
Yeah, as long as Brett Rippon's at quarterback, I won't be taking the Broncos. I think I even took the Jets against the Broncos when they played. The Pats are going to be overwhelming. Honestly, with or without Newton and with or without Gilmore, I still think the Pats would take this game. I'm not sure who the Pats would start at quarterback. I would maybe Stidham, honestly, because Hoyer did not look that great, and Stidham's picks weren't really his fault per se. It's kind of situational, almost Edelman, so I didn't really hate how Stidham played. But yeah, I'd go with the Pats in this matchup either way.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Pats too, and I completely agree with everything you said, Trent. I think that Brian Hoyer just lacked the ability to move the ball. He was constantly airmailing his receivers, whereas Jarrett Stidham, obviously, the first pick was completely Edelman's fault. And then the second one, he underthrew a guy. So, that being said, he was in a situation where he had to force the ball into situations like that. So I'm not going to really fault him for that one. So I hope that if Cam Newton is not ready to go this weekend and the game is played, that they go with Stidham. But either way, I'm with you. I think the Pats are going to win this game. All right, moving on. We have a team or a matchup full of 2 bruisers, the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Cleveland Browns, who looked really good last week, beating out the Cowboys in a shootout. Obviously, their defense was a little questionable, but there aren't a lot of defenses that can contain Dak Prescott and that elite offensive arsenal this year, but the Browns were able to get it done. So props to them. Who are you taking in this game?
I think the Browns could keep rolling here. I think they are on momentum. OBJ's finally found his rhythm, I think, and if he carries that kind of energy into this game, honestly, the Browns could blow out the Colts. I know the Colts have a good defense. I'm not really loving their offense, and the Colts haven't faced a team who's put up like more than 20 points against them at this point in the season. I'm pretty sure Rodrigo Blankenship, their kicker, has outscored every opponent so far, just him alone. So I don't think this Browns team is getting held under 20 points. And they're underdogs in this game. I like the Browns. I'm taking them plus money here, and I think the Browns could give the Colts a beating.
Yeah, I agree with you there, too. I think the Browns are going to win this game. Obviously, I have some family ties to Cleveland that Trent will never let me live down, although I'm not ashamed of it. Will never be. But I'm going to take the Browns in this game. A name to throw out there to watch is D'Ernest Johnson. When Nick Chubb went down, obviously we know he's going to miss about 6 weeks with an MCL injury. Ernest Johnson came in, took 13 carries, took it for 95 yards. So he was really impressive. I think that there's a chance he sees 10 to 12 plus carries a game alongside Kareem Hunt, who we know that Kevin Stefanski loves to utilize 2-back sets in his offense. We look at what he did with Dalvin Cook and Jerick McKinnon in past years in Minnesota. Kareem Hunt is just going to slide into Nick Chubb's role here. He's going to be possibly a top 5 fantasy back for these next couple of weeks while Nick Chubb recovers. But I do think D'Ernest Johnson is going to handle a pretty significant workload and could even end up being relevant in fantasy football. But yeah, I'm going to take the Browns in this game. And let's move on to the final two matchups of the week. They're both pretty good. I'll give you that one. The first one, we have the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Seattle Seahawks. I'll start with you, Trent.
Yeah, I mean, I know Kirk Cousins looked better the last 2 weeks, and he's finally connecting with wide receivers. And the Seahawks defense lets up a lot of yards, and probably will be a decently high-scoring game. But I'm not betting against Russell Wilson. I'm going to continue to keep rolling on that train. I mean, he's still my favorite to get MVP. I still love this team. They're at home against the Vikings. I'm just not in love with the Vikings still, so I'm gonna roll with the Seahawks in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to take Seattle, but I think this game's going to be pretty close just because their secondary has been so bad, literally historically bad so far. Obviously, they finally held Miami to pretty decent numbers on the defensive end last week, but at the end of the day, it's Miami. So while they're a good team, let's be real here, they're not nearly a top 5 or 10 offense in the league at this point. Trent may disagree. But all that being said, yeah, I think that Minnesota is going to make this a close game. I would look for both Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson to eat against the Seahawks secondary. They both got over 100 passing yards or 100 receiving yards, last week in their matchups. And I think there's a good chance that they could push for that again this week. All that being said, hard to bet against the MVP favorite in Russell Wilson right now. So I'm going to take the Seahawks. And Trent, we're going to move on now to the final matchup of the week. The LA Chargers taking on the New Orleans Saints, who quietly put up a pretty big statement win last week. They blew out, I think it was the Lions that they played. And, you know, I'm not necessarily saying we were expecting that game to be close, but Drew Brees and company had not looked amazing up until this week. I think that there's a good chance to get Michael Thomas back against the LA Chargers. Who are you taking in this game?
To be fair to the Lions, I think they had gapped the game. I think the Lions went up 14-0. Then the Saints went up 2 touchdowns. The game ended up being a 1-touchdown game after a late Lions touchdown. But we're still high on the Saints. They may have had a rough start to the season, but I'm still rolling with Drew Brees. I still think he's got something in the tank. I know he didn't look good a couple of weeks throwing the ball into the ground. He's kind of missing Michael Thomas in some of his routes. Or he wasn't there, that's why he missed them. But yeah, if Michael Thomas is coming back, and even if he isn't playing in this game, I'm still going to roll with the Saints. Herbert's looked good. He really has. And that their defense will get through to the Saints offense here. Drew Brees might get a little banged up because, that D-line on the Chargers really looks strong so far this year. But going to roll with the Saints at home. I'm betting with the better quarterback, in my opinion, than Drew Brees.
Yeah, Trent, as you said, we both do love the New Orleans Saints, and I still think that they're going to make a very deep run in the playoffs this year. This week, however, I am actually going to go with the upset just because I've loved the way Herbert's been playing so far this year. He was a guy who preseason I was really high on, hoping that he would eventually win the job from Tyrod Taylor. Obviously, the team doctor took that into his own hands and got it done. And Taylor is still recovering from a punctured lung, which is very unfortunate for him. We obviously have hopes and prayers for him to have a speedy recovery there. But in the meantime, Justin Herbert's looked more than up to the task of handling this offense. He almost led them to beat Tom Brady and the Bucs last week. Brady had some not late game, but mid to late game heroics to definitely pull Tampa Bay ahead in that one. And Justin Herbert, unfortunately, just wasn't able to get the job done on the potentially game-sealing drive or game-tying drive, as it would have been, I believe. But all that being said, I just think that the key to stopping the Saints right now, with Michael Thomas either A, banged up and rusty coming off another week of rehab, or just not playing at all, is to stop Alvin Kamara, because he's been an absolute touchdown machine so far this year. And I look at the Chargers defense, and I think that they just might be up to the task of doing it. So I'm willing to take the risk here, take the upset. I'm going to go with the Chargers. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints win this game either.
Yeah, one last question before we head out here. We're about a quarter through the season. I want to know who your MVP pick is right now.
I do think it's Russ, but I think it's a very close race between him and Josh Allen at this point. And I think that these next couple of games will be telling. I do think it's going to end up being Russ because I think the Bills are going to drop a couple of these games down the stretch. So as of right now, I'm going to go with Russ. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I'm going to go with Russ, and I think you're right. I think the Bills will end up getting some different matchups and eventually lose a few games. The guy I think may give Russ a run for his money is Aaron Rodgers
Oh,
because
yeah.
he has looked really good, especially after a down season for him last season. So I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Rodgers really makes a run for that MVP.
Yeah, you know what? We saw last year, I think, good guy Aaron Rodgers. He was out there in the press conferences and stuff saying he was having fun. And then this year, we've got that attitude back. He came out and said, I think the other day that, a lot of people like to harp on bad years for me, but the sad fact is that bad years for me are career years for other quarterbacks, and he is having a career year right now. So I do think that he definitely could contend for this award. I love seeing the Packers with that fighting spirit again. I think we mentioned, Trent, that bless you, by the
Thank you.
way, that the Packers were probably the worst 14-2 team we had seen in a while last year, and they have looked miles ahead of where they were so far this year. So I think that's going to be an interesting race as we get down the stretch. The NFC is looking really strong. Hopefully the AFC can match them. A couple of teams can start picking it up. Cough, cough, Ravens. We're talking to you. But all that being said, I think that's where we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will be back week 6 to recap our picks and make our picks again for next week's games. Trent, as always, pleasure having you on, man. Love talking football with you. Have a good one, everyone.